All right. CrossCity, how are y'all doing? So, for those of you who don't remember me from past summers, I'll introduce myself somehow, but for those of you who do, just know this. I sold my Jeep, and I have no Jeep breakdown stories on the way to Fresno. I have none. I got a truck, and it worked just fine, and I was comfortable when I got here. So anyway, some things have changed, right? My name is John. I'm one of the pastors at a church in Southern California in a little town called Hemet, and it's a community Christian church there. But this is my 8th summer in a row being able to be with you and speaking with you, and it's an honor for me every time I'm here. But I got to say this, months ago I talked to Zach about this particular date. We lined it up, okay, I'm going to be here on this weekend, and had no idea at the time this was going to be the weekend right before David's memorial service. And I just want to tell you, and I feel honored to be with you and to walk with you through this time. Some of you have come within the last year, and maybe you didn't know David personally. I was going to say, he spent more than 40 years in the ministry, nearly 30 of those years right here at CrossCity, building a great church, and you guys get to be the result and the fruit of his ministry and labor over the years. And now with Zach, I know you guys are in great hands. I'm so proud of Zach and love him, and you guys are being led well. But it's an honor for me to be here with you this weekend, for sure. Yeah. My prayers for my wife and I have been praying for Sue-Ann and Zach and Drew and your church and all of this in the last year, and really, like I said, just honored to be here with you at this specific time. I got to dive right in. I don't have any Jeep stories, so we could run short today, but I doubt it. I want to dive right into Galatians chapter 5. It's a section we call the fruit of the Spirit, and I'm going to be focusing today on the idea of faithfulness. I just want you to see this word pop up in the middle of this. It says, "For the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness." Everybody say it with me. Faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there is no law. So what I did was I took this passage. It's like one of those, great passages. Most people know of it or have heard of it. The fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, and then there's faithfulness in there. And the idea is that sometimes we think like faithfulness is all on us, but in the reality, it is part of the benefit, the byproduct, the blessing of God's Spirit living in us when we begin a relationship with God. And He does those things with us and through us. And so faithfulness it's not possible on our own. Like truly loving people, not possible on our own. Finding peace in a chaotic world, not possible on our own. But we have these things through the Spirit who lives in us, and it's pretty awesome. Now, I did look, though, what is our part in this? And I started looking throughout the Bible, Old Testament, New Testament, for stories of faithfulness, and they all sound pretty much the same. Here is the life of someone who finished well. That's what it looks like over and over and over. Last week, Jim Dalrymple was with you, and he preached a great message out of 2 Timothy, which is Paul's final letter. It's like his last will and testament to Timothy, but also to the church, and a blessing to us. And he's like, I have finished the race. Like, I've finished this. I've fought the good fight. So he finished well. And so we look at that like that's faithfulness, to finish strong. And so what I want to do today is really just kind of take this idea of finishing strong, and instead of saying, when we get to the end of our life, was I faithful? I want us to say, now, what do I need to do now? The operative word here is now. What do I need to do now in order to finish strong? What will faithfulness look like in my life from here on? That's what I want to talk about today. And so in Hebrews chapter 12, just a couple of verses we're going to dig into. If you have your own Bible, Hebrews chapter 12. And I'm going to give you a handful of things to think about with just these couple of verses, but there's a bunch of things here. So the first one would be this: to gain strength from those who have led the way. In order for me to be faithful, to finish strong, I got to gain strength from those who have led the way. And maybe you have people in your life like that. I do. The most recent for me, really, besides Pastor David, was my dad. And he went home to be with Jesus May 29th of last year, 2024. The last 4 months of his life, he lived in our home on a hospice bed. And he just couldn't walk anymore. He had prostate cancer. It went into his bones, and eventually he just wasn't able to walk, and so he's just laying on a bed in our house. We put him in the living room because he was highly social, and we wanted him to be able to do life with us. And so him and I would watch like NBA playoff games, and the grandkids, like my grandkids, his great-grandkids would play on the floor near him and interact with him and talk with him, and we had so many great times. But on the 29th, we knew his time was close. It had been not a good day. He had been struggling, and we thought he didn't have much time left. My wife and I were with him, and there was a nurse and then another person there. There was 4 of us there. And at the very moment I saw the color come out of his face, I knew he was gone. But I quickly said out loud to him, hoping he could hear it on his way out, "Well done, good and faithful servant." I don't know if that's the first thing we hear when we get to heaven, but my idea was, if that's what we hear there, because like in Matthew 25, that's what Jesus says, "Well done, good and faithful servant." That's where we get that. It's from a story he told. I thought, well, how cool would it be for my dad, who served the Lord in ministry for 64 and a half years, how cool would it be, the last thing he heard here, "Well done, good and faithful servant." The first thing he hears there, "Well done, good and faithful servant." I don't know if that's how it works, but that was my goal. And I wanted to honor the one who showed me who Jesus was in the first place. Now, in Hebrews 12, beginning in verse 1, he says something seriously powerful. He says, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses." Now, it goes on, but let me just stop there for a minute. And maybe you know this. When you look in the Bible and you see the word "therefore," you have to ask this question: what is that there for? So in this case, chapter 11. Chapter 11 is what we call the Great Hall of Fame of Faith. And so you got like Abraham and Moses and all these amazing leaders who were faithful to the end, who finished well, and their faith is commended for them in chapter 11. He says, "Therefore, since we have all these people who have finished well before us," this great cloud of witnesses, that's what he's talking about. About 35 years ago, it was the summer of 1990. My wife and I went to South Central LA, and for the first time in my life, I got to speak at an all-black church. And when I say all black, that means my wife and I were the only white people there. Now, I get to pastor a church that's multi-generational, multiracial, just like it is here. But that was the first time I'd ever been in that situation, and that was the first time I'd ever been in a situation where they talked the entire time I was talking. I was not used to that, but I liked it. So here's no joke. Like the whole time I'm talking, they're like, "Yeah, right on, preach it, amen, you go." And I'm just like, whoa. I felt like I had this great cloud of witnesses just encouraging me. It was the longest I ever preached. So some of you now are going, "I was going to say amen, I'm not now." He might just keep going, right? And I think, okay, so these people who have gone on before us, chapter 11, not just the ones that everybody knows, like Moses and Abraham. He ends chapter 11 by saying that there were others. And they were beaten. And they were stoned. And they were persecuted. And they were chained. And they were sawed in two. But they remained faithful. He says that's the witnesses. And maybe we can't hear their voices, but we can be encouraged by their example when things get tough for us. We're surrounded by this great cloud of witnesses. And if they could talk, maybe they would talk and they would say something like this when we're in the middle of it. Like, life is hard and it's confusing and it doesn't make sense and we're going through it, and we could just hear them say, "Just hang in there. I did. And it was worth it. It was worth it. It was worth it. It was worth, like hang in there. It's worth it. Don't quit on God now. You may not see him. You may not know what's going on. You may not hear his voice right now, but just don't give up." That's what that cloud of witnesses is doing for us. They're encouraging us. Don't give up. Keep the faith. It's worth it. And then another thing that comes out of this passage is just this. Let go of things that slow me down. Let go of the things that slow me down. Hebrews 12:1. Let's start where we were. It says, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles." Now, your very own middle school pastor, Keaton, has become a good friend of mine. We both share a love for landscape photography, and I've been in Yosemite with him on a number of occasions. And we've been on the hikes, and we've gotten to spots to take pictures of places, and it's serious fun for us. But I'll tell you this, man, when I go on a hike, I mean like a big hike, like I take the least amount of stuff as possible. Years ago, I was hiking Mount Whitney with a group of friends, and we had a younger guy in the group. And when I say younger, I mean like he was like 30. Some of you are like, that's old, so just keep in mind, perspective, right? He was young, and we kept telling him he needed to train. He didn't. And so like within about an hour of our hike up to Mount Whitney, I had to take half of his pack and put it in mine. The pack that I had spent all kinds of time trimming down to the bare necessities so I wouldn't have to carry it up the hill, right? He's saying, let's get rid of the stuff that we just don't need. Doesn't mean it's bad stuff. In fact, this podium is great. I'm not going to take it on a hike with me. That would be stupid, right? It's like, I'm not going to do that. In fact, this is what he says. Get rid of the unnecessary. Get rid of it's not necessarily bad, but it can be distracting. It can weigh us down. It can slow us down. He says, throw off everything that hinders. I got a life lesson for this between my 8th and 9th grade years of school. When we were finishing, I was finishing 8th grade, my dad, who was a pastor, left the church we were at in San Juan Capistrano, Southern California, and went to a church in Iowa. So between 8th and 9th grade, I went from surfing to corn. It's not my favorite move of all time, Dad. I would talk to him about this move for decades. It wound up being a great experience in Iowa. It wasn't that. We just moved. We had bought a house. My parents had bought the house. We hadn't seen it yet, my sister and I. But when we got there, we weren't able to get into the house yet. The people were still there, and there were a few things we had to do to the house before we could move in. So we rented an apartment for 2 months. Let me tell you what we did. Actually, let me tell you what we didn't do those 2 months. We didn't hang one picture on a wall. We didn't unpack most of our boxes. Why? Because that was not our home. And you and I sometimes, we get bogged down with the stuff. It's not bad stuff. It's just stuff. He says, let go of the stuff that hinders, the stuff that weighs you down, the stuff that slows you down, the stuff that's not necessary. Now, I'm not saying it's wrong to own nice things, okay? Don't hear that. But it is wrong for your nice things to own you. And that's what happens to a lot of Christians. We get distracted. And it can be good stuff, but it just gets in the way. And then he says, point blank, get rid of the sin. The sin. Throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. I'm not even going to ask you for permission to ask you. I'm just going to ask you. Do you have an addiction issue? A bad habit that just keeps creeping up, wrecking your relationships, your life. It's just there. And instead of getting rid of it, you just keep playing with it. You can't decide whether or not you want to do life without it or not. It's like, get rid of it. Maybe it's an attitude of lack of forgiveness, a critical spirit. Like there's all kinds of things that maybe I'm just hanging on to, a sinful attitude that's just messing everything up, but I don't know if I want to get rid of that. Maybe it's just a flirtatious relationship at work that's inappropriate. You know it. But instead of breaking it off, you keep going. I'm going to tell you, and I've seen it over and over, it's going to destroy you and your family and everything else. He says, get rid of the sin that so easily entangles. It's going to trip you up. That's what it's going to do. Third thing he says here, though, is this: never give up until I cross the finish line. We're still in verse 1, by the way, but he says this, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. Again, when I'm running, I can't have anything tying my legs down. That's like the sin. I can't be carrying the extra weight. That's like the good stuff, but it's distracting to me. It's keeping my focus off of Jesus. Like I've got to make sure that I never give up until I cross the finish line. Multiple translations of this really come out differently, but they all say the same thing. Never give up. That's what it's saying. And a couple other passages outside of Hebrews that talk about this, and there's several, but just let me give you a couple. One you guys heard last week, but I'm going to give it to you in a translation of the Bible called The Message. This is 2 Timothy 4:7. It says, "This is the only race worth running. I run hard, right to the finish, believed all the way." That's the Apostle Paul talking to Timothy. Galatians 6:9 says this, "Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." So God is far more interested in how you finish than how you start. Let me say that again. God is far more interested in how you finish than how you start. Jesus at one point in Matthew 25, I referred to it earlier when he says, "Well done, good and faithful servant." It comes out of a story of what we call the parable of the talents. He's not talking about abilities. A talent was a measurement. It was a weight, an amount of gold. So he gives one guy 10 talents of gold. In today's picture, that would be millions of dollars. He gives one guy a whole bunch of money, 10 talents of gold. Another guy a whole bunch of money, 5 talents of gold. Another guy a lot of money, 1 talent of gold. The guy with 10 doubles it. The guy with 5 doubles it. The guy with 1, what did he do? Buried it, did nothing. Now, when you read the story, Jesus is not condemning him because he only had 1 talent to start with. He's condemning him because he did nothing with what he had. To the others, he said, "Well done, good and faithful servant," because what they were entrusted with, they used in a way that would honor their boss. And here's what we do sometimes. Like we literally look at a story like that. I'm like, I don't want to mess it up. So I'm just going to bury that money, that talent, that ability, that creativity, whatever it is. And instead of benefiting the church and benefiting the world, we just keep some of that stuff to ourselves. And he's like, no, that's exactly what I don't want to happen. Being faithful is using what God has given us. Every now and then somebody says to me, "John, one of these days, when I win the lottery, we're going to build that next building. I'm going to pay for it." And I just always want to say, no, you won't. Because here's the truth. If you're not giving anything now, you're not going to give when you get a bunch. And here's what Jesus says. This is the bottom line, okay? It's not a direct quote. This is the bottom line. He judges us and our faithfulness based on what we have, not on what we might do if we had something else. It's just like, what do we have? These are the talents I have. These are the abilities I have. This is the money I have. All of that is like, am I faithful with what I have now? And then he says, if you can be trusted with little, you'll be given more. But a lot of times we're not trusted with what we have because we keep it to ourselves for our own purposes. We've got to keep going and finish. Number 4 is keep my focus on Jesus. And this really is the key to the whole thing. Keep my focus on Jesus. Hebrews 12:2 says, "Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith." Now, it sounds super spiritual to say, keep your eyes on Jesus. How are we going to do that? Well, you're going to need a WWJD bracelet, about 10 Christian t-shirts, a nice big cross, bling, maybe a CrossCity window sticker. You're going to need some. No, how do I keep my eyes on Jesus? Like, I follow him every day. Every day I'm in his word. One of the commitments at our church is we're going to spend every day with Jesus, meaning I'm going to spend time in his word. I'm going to spend time in prayer. I'm going to spend time each and every day aware of the reality that he is with me. So I want to be with him. When they talk in the first century about a rabbi, that's what Jesus was, a rabbi, a teacher, they would all collect their own group of disciples. That's what Jesus did. He did what other rabbis of the time were doing. He had a following. And then this is the idea that you would literally keep your eye on that rabbi, on that teacher, on that leader. And as you're walking down the path, you want to stay as close as possible. You're not just wandering around. You're keeping your eye on him because if he turns, you don't want to miss where he goes. And in fact, you want to be so close that you're covered in the dust of the rabbi who's walking before you. What does it mean to keep our eyes on Jesus? Let me give it to you in a passage from Colossians 3. This is not going to be on the screen. I want you just to listen. And this is out of the Message translation, but Colossians 3, 1 and 2. Just listen. "So if you're serious about living this new resurrection life with Christ, act like it. Pursue the things over which Christ presides. Don't shuffle along, eyes to the ground, absorbed with things right in front of you. Look up and be alert to what is going on around Christ. That's where the action is. See things from his perspective. Again, when Jesus invites people into this relationship, most often the way he said it was so simple. We miss it because we're caught up in religion and ritual. He said, follow me. Isn't that what he said over and over and over? Like, follow me. So I got to stick close. I got to keep my eye locked on him. And the fifth thing here is just remember Jesus endured for me. If I want to finish strong, I remember that Jesus finished strong for me. Hebrews 12:2. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. Listen, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. The cross was not the end. He could see past the cross. He could see to the joy. Guess what the joy is on the other side of the cross? You. Right? That's why he did it, so that you can have a relationship with him. And so he went to the cross with all the pain and the suffering and the agony that was going to be involved there. But he went knowing what was on the other side. And it's exactly the very thing that's going to help us get through some stuff, is knowing there's something better on the other side. A good friend of mine said, I'm at my best as a human being the week before vacation. He says, like, I am a master of my schedule. I get the hard things done. He goes, what I should do is I should schedule stuff like the dentist and shopping with my wife the week before vacation because I know I can do it. Why? Because I know next week I'm going to be sitting on the beach with my family. I can get through this week. I can manage this week. I can get through the hard stuff because I know what's coming next. And when you know something good is coming, it makes it a little easier to deal with the pain of what we have to walk through right now. Jesus willingly went to the cross because he so wanted a relationship with you. It was worth it to him. Revelation 2:10 says this, be faithful even to the point of death, and I will give you the crown of life. Here's what I believe might be happening in some of you today. Some of you might have checked out about, 15 minutes ago. And I don't mean this in a bad way. I just mean because you're sitting there going, I can never be considered faithful, not after everything I've done. Like, John, you don't know my story. You don't know how bad it's been. You don't know how far off the deep end I went. And maybe I'm here today and I'm just like begging God to forgive me, but I just don't even know how he will. And some of you checked out like I'll never be considered faithful. I'm just going to tell you, we said it earlier, I'm going to say it again, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. And you can start now. And you can change some things that will last the rest of your life. You can walk into eternity where Jesus says, well done, good and faithful servant. Not because of what happened in the past, but because of the decisions you make starting now. And things can change for you. By the way, a good friend of mine, his name is Dave Stone. He said something that just kind of rattled my cage. He said, Satan knows your name, but he calls you by your sin. Jesus knows your sin, but he calls you by your name. And the reason you're feeling like I could never be considered faithful because of what I've done is because you're listening to the wrong one. Jesus is the one who made it possible for you to start fresh now, today. It was July 1st. About 10:30 in the morning, I have a phone call. Now, let me explain the phone call. A couple years ago, I had a friend that, he was another pastor at a church in our valley. And just through a series of things, some he was responsible for, some he wasn't. Just life hits sometimes. He wound up in a really, really deep depression. During that time, he lost his wife. She passed away, which made it even worse. I would see him every now and then, let him know I'm praying for him. I would text him every now and then or call him and just check in on him. But recently, a couple months ago, we were watching our adult kids play volleyball. Now, you know you're old when your kids are in an adult league volleyball team. So we're sitting on the side with our canes, We're sitting on the side watching our kids play, and he's just in this space. And it's good to see you, John, and we talked, but I could just see, man, he could not snap out of it. So July 1st, I get this phone call from him. Now, I have my phone programmed to where if I don't recognize the number, like it's not in my database, it goes straight to voicemail. It doesn't even ring, doesn't vibrate, nothing. I don't want to be bothered 12 times a day by somebody selling something that I don't need, or to consolidate all the loan of things that I don't have. I don't need that, so I just go, it's gone. But his name popped up. I saw who it was. And so I'm like, hey, what's up? And he says, I'm back. I'm like, what? I'm back. All right, go talk to me, man. He says, you know where I was at? I mean, worship music was like everything to me for most of my life. He was very involved in music. He goes, I couldn't even listen to worship music. He goes, I've been a pastor for years. I couldn't even read my Bible. I just couldn't. And he goes, I finally got to the point where I was just so desperately in need just to be in love with Jesus again, that I opened my Bible to the book of John. He goes, I didn't want to read. I didn't feel like it, but I knew I had to, so I just started reading. John chapter 1. In the beginning was the Word. The Word was God. And it's like he's reading. He gets down to verse 16, and he goes, I got stuck. Verse 16, talking about Jesus, says, in his fullness, then he gives us grace upon grace. And he's like, what is that? Grace upon grace. Grace upon grace. What is that? He closed his Bible. He couldn't get past the verse. Didn't know what it meant. Again, he wasn't wanting to read anyway, so he's done. Later, he finds himself at the beach. Now, the closest beach to us is Oceanside, Southern California. So he's at Oceanside. He's walking the beach, and he just stops, and he watches the waves come in. Wave upon wave upon wave upon wave. And it hits him. That's what God means. His grace never stops. It says grace upon grace upon grace upon grace upon grace. It just keeps coming. It keeps coming. It keeps coming. He goes, I just imagine myself just laying there on the shore, right there at the edge of the water, wave after wave just rolling over me of God's grace. And you know what happens when a wave comes in like that? It pulls all the little pebbles and the rocks and the little particles of the shells away. And he goes, every wave I just imagine of God's grace was just pulling away from me the little particles of stuff that he didn't want there anymore. I'm back, he said. And what it took was him to realize that no matter how much he had blown it, there was a God who loved him absolutely and relentlessly, was sending his grace after him over and over and over. And I just want you to know he's doing the same thing for you. You say, but you don't know my story. You don't know what no, I don't. But he does. And he absolutely loves you. In fact, Jesus tells the story. We call it the story of the prodigal son, which I don't love the name, actually. I think it should be called the story of a father's love. There's actually two boys in the story, right? But the one son goes off and when wild living blows everything and he eventually comes home because he repented, because he realized he had blown it. He turns around and comes home. But the father is running towards him with arms wide open. The little boy, young man, he begins his speech. Dad, I don't even deserve to be your son. I'll just be one of your servants. I just want to work for you, get 3 meals a day, have a roof over my head. But he doesn't even get the speech out. And the dad's like, shut up. You're my son and you're home. He knows what he did. And God knows what you've done. He knows what I've done. But the moment you turn and you head towards him, there's God. That's why Jesus tells the story. So we don't sit here and make excuses about how bad we've been. He's like, here's a guy that blew everything. But the moment he turned to come home, there was the Father. He says, that's your Father. That's God. Arms wide open. One of the things that CrossCity does, like the church I serve, is we hold a high value for baptism, because that is the public celebration of saying that I'm ready, God, to surrender my life. Like, I'm ready. And in our baptism, we're literally like burying our old life, and we're raised to walk in a new life. And some of you maybe have never done that. I tell people, like, if I have to keep getting baptized every time I mess it up, I just need to stay in the water. Pastor Prune Hands, that's me, right? No, you don't have to keep getting dunked. But man, for some of you today, it's exactly what needs to happen. It's time to fully surrender your life to Christ, bury the old life, and then let that water just wash everything away from you, like grace upon grace, and start a new life with him. Some of you maybe just need to say, okay, Jesus, I'm back. I've known you, I've loved you, but I've blown it, and I'm back. And I'm going to tell you, man, if that's your story, that's where you're at. You can't just then walk away today. You need to tell somebody. So in just a moment, we're going to sing a song. And maybe it's for a first-time decision to follow Christ. Maybe it's just it's time for you, like that prodigal, to return and say, starting now, starting today, I'm going to spend the rest of my life being faithful. I'm going to finish well, no matter what's happened in the past. Could you stand with me? Let's do this. Let's stand. And right before we sing, I want us just to pray together. And maybe even put your hands out like this, if you would. Just as a posture of like receiving this grace upon grace from God. Let's just receive that, okay? God, thank you for this moment. This is going to be big for somebody. Monumental for somebody. And we ask, God, that you would, with open arms, receive every person who runs to you right now. Maybe it's a return home. Or maybe it's that first time to start a relationship with you. Whatever it is, God, we just thank you that you're there with open arms. God, thank you for your grace upon grace upon grace. May we be considered faithful from this day on. In the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen. As they sing, if you want to come forward, there are already people down here to meet you, pray with you, talk with you. Come on down right now. Let's sing.